The single issue which has attracted most attention on Changing London is a question about how do we make London a more friendly, collaborative, caring city. It's not just a nice to have. We know it affects crime rates, it affects our health, it even affects our economic prospects. So I'd like to know what our next mayor is going to do to make London a more neighbourly city.
So there, more neighbourly, more friendly and caring, which is not, these are not words normally associated with British politics, but you might be able to do something, Sadiq Khan.
We need to recognise there are some things that even the best politician in the world can't do. What he or she can do, though, is to create an environment where things happen far easier. The phrase used by sociologists is social hubs, with social bridges to get people who live busy lives, some are disparate, different backgrounds, some may be new arrivals to London, to meet together. It used to be the pub, the post office. Today it could be the mosque, it could be the community centre, it could be a place of work, it could be the tube, it could be the bus. I think you can change the culture in London. By the way, I don't accept, David, that everyone sees London as unfriendly. Capital cities, by definition, are very busy, hustling places. The average age of London is now 34. It's the youngest it's been in decades. And we need to recognise that actually, young people, big issue is quality of life. That includes addressing the housing crisis. That includes addressing the public transport fares crisis. That includes addressing the decent pay for a decent day's work crisis. That includes providing social places. Some of it is streets for young people to play around. Some of it is making sure we invest in youth centres. Some of it is making sure we invest in places where people can meet, whether it's a mosque, the church, the synagogue, or the temple. The key thing I say is this, David. Go back 10 years to a week after 7/7, when people predicted that we'd be turning against each other. People predicted there'd be a backlash and reprisals. And what Ken Livingstone did, both when he was in Singapore, but also when he was in Trafalgar Square a week after 7/7, reminded us that rather than turning against each other, we stood shoulder to shoulder and were united. As Mayor of London, I want to make sure we stay a united city, and I want to bring people even closer together so we can be a beacon, not simply for the rest of the country, but for the rest of the world as well.
Tessa.
Well, I talk in my campaign about building one London that recognises the risk that inequality and fracture poses to precisely what you're talking about, David. And I think that there are two drivers of this. One is what we saw during the Olympics, which was London open to the world. And London is an open city, a self-confident city that welcomes people from other parts of the world, that is pro-European, that creates the opportunity for people to come together as equals. That's one of the ways. We saw that during the Olympics, and as Sadiq says, we saw that in the immediate aftermath of 7/7. London has a very secure identity, I think, particularly at times of pressure and times of crisis. And it is an extraordinary and resilient humanity. But a lot of what you're talking about actually happens very locally, which is right to go right back to this evening. Play streets and the sense of communities, neighbourhood festivals, the sense of communities being engaged with each other is so important. But it's also, we should also never forget that some of the unhappiest Londoners are young people who feel shut out of the opportunities in the greatest city in the world that always seem to belong to someone else. And that's what I want to address if I become mayor.
David?
The biggest threat to Londoners in terms of caring and neighbourliness must be the challenge to keep London the city of mixed communities. If you are decanting communities and driving them out of their areas through gentrification, you're destroying that neighbourliness. If politicians are using the phrase affordable rents but don't actually believe in council houses and social rents, you're destroying those communities. If you're driving people into private rented accommodation, which are seeing rents increase by 20% over 2 years in my London borough, 40% in another London borough, you're driving against that neighbourliness. So the next big challenge for the Mayor of London is surely housing. Stand up for council housing. Fight right to buy. Don't talk about affordable rents, talk about social rents. Let's have a register of private landlords. Do something about private buy-to-let that's actually inflating the market. I think there should be mortgage relief. And if people are buying homes off-plan in Malaysia and Singapore, then I'm afraid they can afford to pay more tax so we can actually build for ordinary Londoners. That's the challenge to whether we are a caring city or whether we're to go down the road of Paris. An inner London of the very wealthy, and everyone on this panel owns a home worth more than $750,000. And my office has checked. Everyone on this panel. So the bottom line is that's the threat to a London that cares. Do something about homes for ordinary Londoners.
Yours is in that bracket, right?
It is.
Okay, fair enough. Christian.
Over the past couple of years that I've been doing this, I've developed a framework for my policies, which is to make London more affordable, livable, and sustainable. And I believe that everything that a mayor needs to do ought to fit into that framework. And I'll give a couple of examples. First of all, we do need to tame the car. The car is a very destructive influence in a lot of places. So the play streets idea is absolutely right. In San Francisco, they did research to show that roads with greater numbers of cars, people know each other less. There's less links in those houses. So that's an absolutely very important thing that we ought not to prioritize. The thoroughfare aspect of streets, we ought to encourage the activity in streets. And I'd like to, in terms of housing, I totally agree. Housing is the big issue that will bind us together. And I'll just tell the story of one of the guys who works for me, Dan, who's a fantastic designer, designed all this stuff on my website and all my leaflets. And so until recently, Dan was paying two-thirds of his income in rent, and clearly was absolutely struggling. And if we can't ensure that people like Dan, who are very talented, who are the future. Dan is 24 years old. They are the future of London. They are what will make London survive and thrive for the next generation. If we can't ensure that people like him are able to live in the city and able to set down roots and stay there, we will not have a London worth living in. So we have to do everything in our power as mayor and as other politicians to ensure that people like Dan can live here and thrive. Thank you.
Gareth Thomas.
David, as you know, I come from the co-op tradition, and it's not just building more housing that we have to commit to, important as that is. We have to commit to building more communities in which people can afford to live. And I take my inspiration from a remarkable organisation, almost as good as yours, Coin Street Community Builders, which on the south bank of the River Thames has completely regenerated the Oxo Tower, one of the most iconic symbols in South London. And in between the glitzy restaurants at the top and the coffee shops at the bottom are 5 floors of social housing. That social housing is run as co-op housing. The tenants set the rents and they also set the rules. And as well as the huge numbers of tourists who wander along the South Bank as a result, there is a vibrant community that looks after each other and sets rents at an affordable rent. That should be the inspiration going forward for the mayor. But we've talked about the City of London and financial services in London. We could have more financial services that are owned and run by people across London. Credit unions. I'd like to see a credit union bank, bringing together the existing credit unions in London, backing them up with the power of a mayor in terms of advertising on the tubes and trains, bringing Londoners together to create their own financial services, setting interest rates at a rate which the credit union can afford and which the people who depend on the credit union can afford. We need new institutions like that to help Londoners come together. I agree with Tessa about the Olympics. It was a wonderful thing, but it was in the past. We need to look to the future. And that's why I say London should bid not only for the European City of Culture, but we should also build for the Commonwealth Games. Glasgow was great last year, but London could be even better. It could be a great friendly games, and it could encapsulate the spirit of London as it is at the moment and extend that friendliness still further.
And finally, Diane Abbott.
I'm glad Christian is concerned about Dan. I'm concerned about Dan. I'm also concerned about Delroy and Amina and Abdul. The key to being an effective mayor of London is you care about all the communities, you bring them all together, and you do not allow any community to retreat into their silo, whether that silo is a coffee shop in Dalston or a temple in South London. David Cameron was talking today about fighting extremism and jihadism. He said some very interesting and important things, but as London mayor, I would be wary of any narrative which painted Muslims as the enemy within. Everything David said on housing was correct, and I think you may find I've been fractionally more consistent on these issues than other people have. But, you know, we have to care about all the communities, not just the Dans. We have to understand where they're coming from, their art, their culture, bring them all together. We have to fight social cleansing, and above all, we have to stand up for Londoners rich and poor, whether they're called Dan or whether they're called Delroy, and take London forward. That is the mayor I would be.
Well, thank you very much for all of our candidates. Just before we go, I'm just going to get 15 seconds from each of our panellists, a kind of an upsum as to whether you're impressed with what you've seen. Do Labour members and those who will take part in the primary have a good choice, do you think?
I think they've got a very good choice. I think that's a wide range. I think they're all quite different. Although, you know, they're stealing each other's policies, you've also got to think they're likely to be up against Zach Goldsmith. So in voting, people will have to think who is going to stand up best to him, because he'll be a superficially glamorous character, probably well backed by Linton Crosby.
We're glamorous.
All the dark.
I'm glamorous.
Yes,
I'm glamorous. Woo!
You're all super glamorous, and you've all got different strengths. I think it's going to be a difficult choice and a tough fight.
Good. Rafael?
Yeah, I agree entirely. It's fantastic. The choice of nuance, all very much around certain particular themes. My one concern is that those themes, they did start to feel a bit Zone 1, Zone 2 very often. And I would just warn everyone that London is much bigger than that. And I grew up in suburban London, and you know, it's probably, you know, there are those inner London boroughs, Labour as you like. Actually, Croydon, not so Labour. Finchley, where I grew up.
How about someone from Harrow?
Harrow.
Well, you know, and Ilford went Labour, but you know, there are some.
Big up for Ilford.
London's bigger than Labour. Yeah. That's the one thing I would leave everyone with.
Okay, Tony Travers.
Well, it's good to have come to an event where all the candidates got to each idea first, which is very encouraging. Mathematically difficult, but everybody... I mean, I think on the point Rafa made earlier about business, it's going to be hard for the Labour Party in this campaign to put across its message about things like high pay and the approach of some businesses to paying taxes without still sounding slightly anti-business, and I think that needs to be moderated a bit, given that 90% of people in London, 85% of people in London work in the private sector. And my third thought really is that if you're looking for one thing that people, I think all of us feel occasionally in London, even though we love it, is slightly powerless. So if the mayor can do anything, it's how can the mayor make us as an individual, as part of the city, part of its ecology, feel we have a bit more power, somebody to go to who can change things when we want them to go, when we want something that's now going wrong to go right.
So that's the challenge. Before they really do throw us out, let me just quickly thank my panel, Rafael Behr, Toynbee and Tony Travers. And here they are, the people who would run our city: David Lammy, Tessa Jowell, Sadiq Khan, Diane Abbott, Gareth and Christian Wolmar.